This is a little ghost reference to the illustrations I did in Anne Carson's book Antigonic, translation of Antigone, and this was one of the images. The original image was just the cinder block and the man, and then everything else came many years later when I put it in a book of mine. This is another just one-off. Okay. Communications with the dead. Last night you called me on the phone. I could hear your late great cats mewling in the background. I could hear the one with the bad purr crackling. The wind was knocked out of all of you. I'm hungry, you said. No one comes by anymore. In my dumb head, I continue constructing the wrong things. I cannot fathom you. The extensions on your house get more and more elaborate. I sit in my seat, condemned, a lesser character, a messenger in this Greek tragedy. One who cannot leave the prison of pleasure and life. Because you love, you come apart. This is your love speaking. Your hair is wonderful today. This is a microscopic caress at a party that burns until 5 a.m. This is the dead fathoming. This is coming home with your gorilla heart, all disordered. This is feeling like a steamboat swaying at the wharf at midnight. But this is also your life, made with your clumsy hands. Your brain lighting up when you see a beautiful woman eating French fries in a dark bar. Your head split down the middle by a brook, each hemisphere divine, witchy. Out of your depths, your trouble, your grief speaking, the crazy absent fathers all breaking wind and fire, the fire engorged, and your heavy body is getting up and going. This is starting a sentence with, I've never told anyone this. And you're gruesome, hungry, at the edge of the earth where the dead wait from a babble in the ground in a vortex of quilts. The dead, they are listening. They want to be loved. They want to be remembered correctly. We bring ourselves to the river, and we feed ourselves coffee and blasts of airborne opiates. This is bone dust, a fistful of mint, the collected writings of Dante that cover everything in a brunette wood. There's the clear image of someone beside you who looks just like you, but can get blue bottle flies to land on her finger. This is the optic nerve in endless reflections of your friends. This is your friends making you a massive cake, filled with blackbirds and figs, making halos with their hands, saying loyal things, and getting emotional. This is leaving a dark bar with them. In the cab ride home, you lay in each other's arms. This is a newer one. I'm going to read a lot of elegies tonight, so this is a good segue into the next part. Elegy with clothes. All of your giant beige bras floated up into the atmosphere. Blue eggs fell down the chimney. The porch losing its screened-in mind. Caved in, I mistake one living cell for another. Your hand on the mallet of my life. You come detonating mid-air with your own grief. It's not even mine. I watch mice eat through everything. The world begins a wolf tied to a flower. Can you see how it happens like that? Something too violent is attached to something too living. All the poems I'm going to be reading tonight are from a collection of elegies of sorts. This first one's called Making Applesauce with My Dead Grandmother. I dig her up and plop her down in a wicker chair. She's going to make applesauce and I'm going to get drunk. She's cutting worms out of the small green apples from the backyard, and I'm opening up a bottle. It erects like a tower in the city of my mouth. The way she makes applesauce, it has ragged strips of skin and spreads thickly over toast. It's infamous. Eating it is as close to God as I'm going to get, but I don't tell her. There's a dish towel wrapped around her head to keep her jaw from falling slack. Everything hurts. But I don't tell her that either. I have to stand at the call box and see what words I can squeeze in. I'm getting worried. If I dig her up and put her down in the wicker chair, I'd better be ready for the rest of the family to make a fuss about it. I better bring her back right. The whole house smells of cinnamon and dust. We don't speak. She's piling the worms, half alive, up in a silver bowl. She's throwing them back into the ground, right where the body should be. Medieval. At the funeral, they carried boomboxes on their shoulders, blaring Chopin. Swaggering over the snow in sync, in all black, the cloth of penitents and kings. A hole is free to dig if you know how to ask the men with the right tools. Funerals need not break the bank. Like the procession of Danes and Dukes in Hamlet in the muddy woods, no embalming, no facade, no priests, no love, no bagpipes, no rug of plastic grass. Funerals are like poker games in the back room at the Mobius strip club of grief. The stakes are high. You have to get pneumonia to get in. You have to cough and gurgle. You have to have a cat on your knee and refuse to eat. So, after my grandmother died, she was a poet and she had written so much about grief in her life. She lost her husband when he was very young, very violently, and she never recovered from it and wrote obsessively about it in her own work, as well as about other losses, but that was the biggest one. And after she passed away, I started realizing, reading her poems, just how chilling it was, how accurate her poems were about what it felt like to grieve. And she had one poem in particular called The Mobius Strip of Grief. And I thought it was such an apt title because there's something, the Mobius strip, if you probably know, is an infinity, basically. Just the endlessness of grief in families and how it's almost passed down from generation to generation and so learned from children, from their parents. And I started thinking of her as existing in this place
that I started calling the Mobius strip club of grief. So all these poems exist in that in-between place. At the Mobius strip club of grief, come on in, the ladies are XXX. If you want the skinny ones, we've got skeletons crackling around the poles. Over at the bar, there's Bertha with her breasts that hang to her stomach, gorgeous with a shaken drink and murderous with a maxi pad. At the Mobius strip club of grief, all the drinks are free. Grandma's grocery store rosé in gallon bottles on every table. And the dead don't want your tips. They just want you to listen to their poems. Don't do anything potentially dangerous and call every once in a while. In fact, they tip you at the Mobius strip club of grief with checks. With a sigh, they'll throw one down at your feet. We make it rain with checks. Wait until next Monday to cash. Then the dead are sitting down in the back of the club, dying further, sniffing, shuffling into the bathrooms, holding their skin in their hands, farting methane and sobbing across the stage with their last meal. It's the raciest show in town. And ladies, there's men too, hanging themselves on the bathroom doors and from the rafters, totally naked, with their cocks in their hands, tears coming down their faces. Ladies, you'll love how their feet smell, how their bones protrude, how they leave no note. Erotic dancing takes the place of Greek tragedy, just as the gladiatorial fights did in Rome. But it is a private dance no one can touch or see, a feeling every day I enter and close a curtain behind. Sitting alone with it, looking at it through a tiny hole, something lithe and naked, shaking in the spotlight beyond which I can never reach. Remember that suffering cannot do what it did for Christ. We do not get to go home afterwards, cannot be imagined into the arms of the Father. See how I do not rise up or shift the stone, do not inspire a nation. I sit at the bar consuming fried food, put $5 into the machine and shoot bucks with a long green rifle, not speaking, not calling out anyone's name. Just me and the deer, grazing in a clearing in the woods. I can't tell anymore who I am grieving. Something bigger and more catastrophic has died, but died out of necessity. Something that thought itself into indispensability, burst from every atom, outward, like autumn fireworks over the lake. I'm just recording its scream and glitter down, just making a serial from its fantastical, dazzling demise. I can't tell anymore if I'm grieving you particularly, or simply the circumstances brought about by your life and death. I find erroneous, this big grief, like those limbs people find in their beds and throw down onto the floor, only to be told again and again when the whole body is thrown with it that it is attached, it is theirs, they were born with it. Honeybee. When the male enters a female honeybee and manages climax, his genitals explode and break off his body. It is the most dedicated orgasm in the universe. His penis stoppers her like Ali Baba's boulder at the entryway to a cave of treasure. She's sealed with a spell. Having let loose their tragic progeny and prevented another from entering her, the male bleeds out and dies in the grass. This really happens. So it is at the Mobius strip club of grief. Off hours, the dead wait at the center of the room, sitting backwards in chairs, lounging and nipple tassels, reading goodbye letters that had been tucked into the casket. The disco ball in the center of the room is like a flamboyant, pockmarked moon spinning silver acne over the dancing dead. The pollen is aching. When it's time, the competition is fierce here in the air. 25,000 males assemble and compete for a single deadly orgasm. Progeny is everything here. Our motto is, I'd rather be dead than share you with another. I was reading a book about the sex life of the natural world, and I was like, good God. I thought we added that. It's gory. Emily Dickinson. Some nights she comes to act as courier, midwife to our own skills. Emily come like a UFO to implant her genius in us. Our Queen Mab condemned to be the only woman mentioned in the lyric omnibuses of her epic, easy scapegoat for men's centuries. She stood in for all women. So now, of course, she comes to blow off steam in the privacy of the green room. All those living years she walked from yard to yard, gardens flourished in opium poppies. She went out at night to see the owls and wed her genius, passion applied like a hot iron sword, and no one can take her clothes off ever. She comes, and her language takes them off of us, not piece by piece, not fumbling buttons, but all at once in a single shot, her tiny poems like grenades that fit in the hand. We bask in the debris, stripped down to our private parts, the snow white of the bone, the authentic corpse and heat, the absolute original. Lap dance. I think everyone's glad I'm dead, said the stripper with the caved-in face. Her fingers were bone and no sinew. She flapped her arms at the two wrens caught up in the rafters, staring down onto the empty dance hall. Tiny chirps rained like sparks from an electric saw in their little hearts. No one here is glad anyone is dead, but there's a certain comfort in knowing that the dead can entertain us if we wish. We line up outside looking drowned, telling whoever comes our way that we are falling very fast and that we are fine. The dead are wrinkled as jet streams cutting across the room with glasses on their heads, B vitamins under their tongues. They keep it cold inside so no one can smell their breath, their hair still growing, crackling out of their skulls, and we file in ones and twos, clinging to our tragedies, finding our favorite face, and it looks back at us with indifference, contempt, chill disappointment. You never came much when I was alive, says one with red hair, laying on her side like a Botticelli on a stage. And now you want a piece? $20 for 5 minutes. I'll hold your hand in my own. I'll tell you you were good to me. So I'm just going to end with this poem called I Am Unfaithful to You with My Genius. And thanks for listening, and it's great to meet you all. There are no time periods the strip club of grief does not extend to. It's a priori, omnipotent, a saloon of the underworld, full of noblesse with their vast sprinkling of literature and philosophy, women of letters who cast about in their intimate coteries the halo of their own genius. Women who go at it with trumpet and lyre, not flute nor harp, and men in wild metamorphosis with no qualms. To hell with time, they say, wandering in and out of the confines of your little world, hoping upon hope to pull you out of the past and into the gorgeous, death-rattling moment. When we die, we strip, wash, harden, burn, urinate, bloat, grind into a fine powder, into a paste, spread on the endless paper cuts of our descendants. There is no room for modesty in this vague realism. But hours after the moment of death, the body below the head looks creepily good. Have you seen the dead stripped? Death's last-minute cosmetic surgery, the skin taut from gravity, confined in beauty for one last hurrah. Then we lay naked before nature and let her ravish us, undoing everything. Ladies, enjoy the pleasures of your own mind. The creative woman in this living patriarchy wants to be both object and subject of creation. Blow up your television. Love me instead, my genius says to me. Inspire, but do not write, said Le Brun in his poem to lovely ladies who want to be poets. The gods created you for love. Love would look with anger burning to see you waste your night on poems. I feel a little worthless with your pregnancy, my husband said, coming home after Magic the Gathering. My husband full of whiskey beside me in the bed. Men created a patriarchal society in order to be indispensable. Simple scientific preparation of a sperm bank could make them totally valueless. When men saw what women could create, they freaked out. And from that crippling feeling of inadequacy, at being unable to bear children, men went on to make us think that they were the creators, but it's all a lie. I thought this was a very wise observation, and I agreed. Inspire, but do not write, said Le Brun to women, hoping that women would not notice that we were already built to write, born ourselves a loaded gun, ready to produce language and meaning and sense. True, women like to inspire. They're not greedy about it. They temper their minds in order to give. It's a delicate blending of many gifts, not the supremacy of a single one. It implies taste and versatility, with fine discrimination and the tact to sink one's personality, as well as to call out the best in others. Ponce Denis Le Brun, literally the French Reign of Terror's official poet, and in his private life wielded his particular horrors, beating his wife in his rages. His own mother and sister helped her escape. Critics agree, a few fine strophe, but not one good ode. We drink to his death and to his failures. Judith Butler sees some of this grief in the realm of the intersubjective, the vulnerable body living among society, but me, I eat the bread of failure, never a flower, never the beautiful white heifer who wandered among the black and green seaweeds, wondering what the hell happened. I was never hidden by Jove. I cannot write about beauty that rankles and drives no chariot of fire before me, but instead lays out on a slab of wood in the rain and stays neither wet nor dry. In my education, I did not learn but as I went, plodding inelegant through institutions like the women before me. When I sit down to write, I feel unfaithful. Why should I do one thing over another? You, your husband, your children, whose genius am I among? You plucked the pencil from your lover's hand. I'm sitting in his old office in your spinning wooden chair, and now you are both dead. He hung himself and you died of pneumonia. Out in the backyard, furthest from the brook, you lie like a vampire in your chest. If I could go out and dig you up and rub your leathered face with mine, I would. Like Antigone, I would ruin myself for you. Your skull is so close. Your body is so near. I could stand on it like a stage, bow and let the lights fade. You raised me like a poem is raised, far too undone, a single wolf, stalker, woman's external demon of genius, and I take no other, fall at the feet of this sex to whom you owe your mother. Thank you so much.
We were thinking of maybe
Oh, a few
if you are not too
questions.
tired.
Sure. Yeah. Great.
Thank you, Bianca, for this wonderful and moving reading. Does anybody want to ask her a question? I have a question. Okay. Yesterday you mentioned how you got into poetry comics through a friend of yours who told you about it. So I was wondering if you could tell us briefly about this new genre or form.
Yeah, there's so much to say about what is and isn't poetry comics, but in general, it's this movement of people who have noticed the similarities between poetry as a form and comic books as a form. The placement of panels, the white space on the page, the text itself and its sort of line breaks in a comic, often they feel like poems. I remember with me, I noticed it in Peanuts very early, and I just, there was something about the 4-panel of a Peanuts comic that often is a 4-panel, that just felt so beautifully poetic to me. And I'd always loved visual art and comics in particular throughout my whole life, and I've always loved making my own, and also always loved poetry. But I'd never heard of the term poetry comics, and it's a very new term, and some people in the community have started using this term, and ones like it, like visual poetry, concrete poetry, of course, it's an older term, comics poetry, and it's really exciting because you get to explore different ways of combining text and image, and then kind of seeking out these different things that may fall under the category. That's one thing I really love doing. And just talking about what it means to combine text and image together, because I think it's very powerful. There's something really electric that happens when you put an image beside a word. It just changes everything about both of those things. And in some ways I feel like it's also subconsciously a reaction to the internet age, since we're so used to seeing text and image together now, and all the social media platforms are now completely catered to having an image as well as your text. So I think it's a really wonderful kind of movement in the poetry world. For me, it's more based in the poetry world than the comic world, but it's not that for everybody. Some people are very based in the comic book world. So yeah, but as you can see, I keep the two separate as well. So I still believe in the power of just words.
But there is also, in the combination of both, a matter of time for the reader or for the person
Very
that
different.
is looking, because there's more time for for the image, but for more time for the words also.
Yeah.
I think it's something else in the response to it. No?
Yeah, I mean, you could see when I was reading them out loud, it was a little awkward because you usually linger longer over the images, I feel.
Yeah.
Although now when I say that, then I think, sometimes when I'm reading a comic book, I'm just flying through it, you know? Like, but yeah, the timing's very different.
Yeah. Also because, I don't know, I have the perception also of the time that it takes to make those drawings. You know, like when I'm looking at them, it's not only the image, like you look at it and you go, but I'm...
Well, mine are a little less, like a lot of traditional comics are very one color, or there's not a huge amount of detail, and I think that that's one of the great things about comics is that the faces are kind of impersonal, so you can project onto them and see yourself in that, and it's simple and beautiful and just like for children, like very immediate. But with mine,
yours is more elaborate.
really like little teeny weeny things like hidden in the image and stuff that I like to think of them as like looking for little things inside of it. So yeah.
Wait, we need to pass on.
No se puede sacar.
¿No se puede sacar?
No llega tan lejos.
Okay, so you guys come here to us? Yeah.
What is the most inspiring thing for your work from Anne Carson?
Well, we talked a lot about it yesterday, but probably her use of talking about other things. Like, we talked a lot about the glass essay from Glass Irony, God, and her use of ekphrastic, the ekphrastic poetry form, which is poetry about art, other people's art. I find it very inspiring how she gets so involved in a character, an author, or a play, and explores that in her own work and makes both that other thing really interesting to me, as well as like create this wonderful piece that I love and I find really inspiring. So that element of Anne Carson's work I love, and I think that's the essayist in her, but also the poetic soul. And I love how that too, that she can mix genres so effortlessly and doesn't care what's allowed and not allowed, and kind of paves her own way on how to be a classic scholar and a poet and a visual artist and all these things. She just does what feels really authentic to her as a writer, and I think we can all learn from that as writers ourselves.
Who else? Michael? Can you come? Thank you.
Bianca. Yesterday you spoke about your interest in ekphrastic work, right?
Yes.
And my question is, have you considered performing that exercise with a text that isn't written in English, in a language that's foreign from yours, and instead of doing the type of artistic translation with a text you truly understand, maybe depending on the shape of the letters or the sound of the language?
I think that's amazing. I mean, I know people who have done things like that. From what I understand, you're saying is translating a text that you're not even if you're not familiar with the other language.
Yeah.
Finding a way to collaborate with it and translate it. What Anne Carson does, her use of the word translation, I find really incredible, and I think she's changed a lot of people's perceptions about what translation can be. And I love that method of art where you translate and create something completely new that's mission isn't just to kind of try to find the closest match to what the author's word was, but instead try and invoke some sort of spirit of what they were doing and respond to it in your own artistic way. I myself haven't, I mean, I have thought, the one thing I thought I would like to do is work with Dante's work, because there's such a tradition of illustration for his beautiful work, and I love his books so much that I always thought that that would be something I could experiment with, but, you know, it would be a very experimental translation. If I were to translate it, it would be very experimental because I don't speak Italian, and, you know, but I could have a lot of fun with it, I think.
Of course, it would mean something to you, right? Even if you don't, say, grab the entire meaning of it. I think, for example, I can appreciate the sound of Arabic, right? But if I see it on paper, it's more
visual. Yeah.
Right? I can't read it.
I know when I see Arabic on paper, there's no sound in my head, really. Although, yeah, Arabic is so beautiful to listen to, too. Yeah, I mean, that would be, though, if you were, I don't want to, like, misappropriate either. Like, there's, I don't know, like, if, I don't know. Like, playing with somebody else's language, I mean, why not? I don't know, if you did it in a completely authentic, you know, from a place of really good intentions or something.
It's kind of like the homophonic translation, no? Like you don't know the language and you translate through the sound. But it would be the sound through images. No?
I'm trying to remember, I think it was the book, The Flowers of Bad.
Baudelaire?
Yeah, it was this guy, I forget his name, but he did a translation of Baudelaire that was like he pressed spell check and used like the first word, and then like sometimes would do like a phonic translation of a word, and so it's just this like crazy like.
The Flowers of Bad?
It's called The Flowers of Bad.
Flowers of Bad.
Yeah. Sorry.
What brings you to the elegy as a poetic form? I sensed a connection with the dead, both from the familial side, but also from the poetic side. On the one hand, your grandmother, and then on the other hand, Emily Dickinson. I also sense that partially some of the power of your elegies. I felt a political strength, a political force together with the poetic force. How would you describe your relationship to the elegy as a poetic form?
I think there's so much there. I started writing elegies after my grandma died simply because I felt very driven to. But I wasn't satisfied with them, and I was doing them more as cathartic writing. And I started thinking about the elegy form and wanting to go deeper into it and figure out what grief meant in a poem, and I felt like I was stretching it out so much that it had almost departed from the strict elegy way or something. Like I wasn't satisfied with it being cut and dry as an elegy, and not only that, but I felt like my grief was expanding in this way that was encompassing more than just a person, loss of a person. It started encompassing how I felt about her life as a whole. And there was some anger there, and I think that the grief became bigger than just the grief for a single person, but the grief for a generation, a family, a culture, and how to talk about that. I found this macabre, crass way of doing it, which is placing it in a sort of strip club. But to me, I'm still in it, and it's very, I feel like it's still kind of nebulous to me in what it means, but I want it that way because I feel like the more I'm exploring it, the more places I can go with it, and surprise myself. But yeah, I've just been so interested in the idea of grief and how far one can take the elegy form. It's almost like, I feel like a love poem, because so much of poetry can be a kind of love poem. And in that way, I've been realizing that so much of poetry can be a kind of elegy. And for some reason, I'm naturally drawn towards both those things in my work. I'm a romantic.
Sí. Well,
Yeah, totally.
thank you, Bianca, thank you again. And let's go out there to have a toast.
Thank you so much.